Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Bible Discoveries, the weekend show. My name's Corie and I'm joined by my husband Matlock. Hey Matlock.
Isaiah 9 to 29 is what we read today. Hope you guys read it. And that's it. Isaiah questions, Corie.
Yeah, Isaiah questions. So if this is your first time here on this program, on Bible Discovery, the ministry as a whole, we take you through and we go through the entire Bible every year. But this program specifically that you're watching right now, we look at Monday to Sunday's reading and we answer and discuss your questions that you send to us via the comment section. And if you're not watching on YouTube, if you're watching on another platform, you can definitely still get your questions and comments to us. You just have to email us or write to us via snail mail in our offices in either the States or Canada.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's good. Corie,
Yeah.
I didn't even say hi. So hello.
Hello.
Let's open up with a question for you.
Let's do
What's
it.
your favorite question?
Yes.
I
Thank
know.
you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for asking me this question.
What is the historical backdrop of Isaiah?
Let's just bask in Isaiah. Okay, so I love this time period. That's why Matlock's saying this of Isaiah. It's really interesting. He tells us right away that he prophesied during the reigns of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. And these guys are really interesting kings. They've been verified historically and archaeologically, which is a whole other story. But so we're told that Isaiah, I think it's Isaiah chapter 4, we see Isaiah getting his commissioning as a prophet in the year that King Uzziah died. But we're also told earlier that Isaiah had written down in Chronicles and Kings, we're told that the prophet Isaiah, son of Amos, presumably before he was prophesying, he had a job in the courts of Uzziah. And that job was writing down the history of Uzziah as it was happening. So everything that's going on, he's this royal recorder, writing this down. And then he receives this commissioning as a prophet in the year that Uzziah died. And so he would have seen this really interesting time period of peace and expansion for the kingdom of Judah under King Uzziah. But in this time period of peace, there's a lot of political turmoil going on the edges of Judah. There's a lot of political turmoil in Israel, in northern Israel, and in all the different things. The Assyrian Empire is growing back into prominence, becoming the Neo-Assyrian Empire. So then during Jotham's reign, this starts to hit the fan where Assyria is really becoming this massive threat. We get into Jotham's a really good king. Uzziah was a good king. He had some issues with pride later on in his life. Jotham was a good king, but he only reigned for 16 years. And that includes probably about a 10-year co-regency with his father Uzziah. So really, he was probably only an independent king for 6 years. But yeah, he does a good job. We get into Ahaz. Ahaz is a really bad king. So this would have been a really interesting time to be the prophet Isaiah, because he's literally speaking to this ungodly King Ahaz. And what happens during Ahaz's reign is to respond to the Neo-Assyrian threat, northern Israel and Syria team up and decide that they're going to try to take over Judah and bolster their army essentially to be able to withstand the Assyrian threat. But what Ahaz does is he reaches out to Assyria and says, I'll become your vassal kingdom if you save me from all these crazy rebel kings who are coming after me right now. So during the reign of Ahaz, he gets to witness the fall of Syria Aram with its capital city of Damascus, copies their religious structure, probably because it had a really great, glorious reputation. But anyway, he copies that in the temple. And but Assyria still harasses Ahaz anyway. He wasn't able to really buy his freedom very well. Assyria just kept taking more and more and more. Ahaz, when his son Hezekiah is old enough to know what's going on, they witness the fall of northern Israel to the Assyrian Empire. So by the time that King Hezekiah comes on the scene, Isaiah, the prophet, is still prophesying. He's a lot older at this point, but Hezekiah knows at this point, because he's seen northern Israel fall. He knows that Syria has fallen. He knows that the Assyrian Empire is coming after Judah next. And Hezekiah makes some really interesting religious decisions because of this, trying to purify the country in the name of God and all these religious reforms. And Assyria marches on Judah as well. We get all of this recorded, not only in Kings and Chronicles, but also in Isaiah. So it's a really cool biblical time period because you get to see all of these different angles, but it's also really, really interesting historically because we can look into the Neo-Assyrian records as well and see even carved images of, for example, the destruction of the Judean city of Lachish that we're told King Sennacherib destroys Lachish and sends messengers from Lachish to talk to Hezekiah in Jerusalem. We have images, ancient images that were carved, probably based off of eyewitnesses. I mean, a lot of archaeologists believe that because of the details of the Lachish reliefs that are currently housed in the British Museum. But we can see the results of this war and also the records of this war from not only the biblical perspective, but also the Assyrian perspective. So that would be the historical backdrop of the prophet Isaiah, is a lot of change and the general rise of the Neo-Assyrian Empire that really takes over the ancient Near East. And we even get hints of the Neo-Babylonian Empire that is like a thorn in the side of Assyria, because we see Merodach-Baladan sending messengers to King Hezekiah, and King Hezekiah being really open and like, yeah, come on in. Basically, I'll make an alliance with you against Assyria. And Hezekiah getting in trouble from Isaiah over that. So lots of political change, lots of religious change. I mean, 4 kings. 4 decently long-living kings that Isaiah gets to prophesy to. So he was a long-lived kind of prophet. But yeah, from his early start, Isaiah is of royal descent himself, it appears. So he's like a cousin to the kings, which probably explains why he had originally that position of court recorder in the first place. But makes it really interesting.
Very good.
That's what I would say about the historical backdrop of Isaiah.
I got nothing to say.
I could talk about it for hours and hours and hours, so I'm just going to stop now.
Yeah, that's good. Corie, that was a good answer.
Thank you. I spend way too much time thinking about this time period of Isaiah, so thank you for allowing me to share.
That's okay. I think about the Roman Empire all the time.
I actually do too, but it's part of my whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, I think about this more than the Roman. Anyway.
That's fine.
The Assyrian Empire and the Babylonian empires, I think, more than the Roman empires. But I'm there with you guys.
Yeah, I hear you.
Isaiah 9.
All right.
I'm going to throw a question your way.
Yes, I was just reading it.
I'll read it to you.
Please.
Okay, Matlock. What does it mean from Isaiah 9 that the government will be on Christ's shoulders?
Exactly what it says it means.
But what does it mean, Matlock? What does it mean?
Right. Yeah, it means exactly what it says. Okay, so let me read this. Okay, so it starts off in verse 6, Isaiah 9, verse 6, and verse 7 is the famous one. For to us a child is born, and to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end. On the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. Okay, so what this is talking about is Christ is king, right? The son of, right? It talks here first, for the child to us is born, a son to us is given. This is this famous thing, Emmanuel, God with us, right? Christ is born. And the government, okay, the authorities, the rulers, will be on his shoulder. What does that mean, to be upon his shoulder? Essentially, what it means is that Christ will have power over the government. The government depends on him to stand, essentially. And that's actually what you see. So even throughout history, as the Christian faith started off, it was this little small, tiny small group of people in Judea, right? Then it ends up growing throughout the Roman Empire and the world, and it keeps growing, growing, growing. And that's the prophecy that Daniel spoke about with the stone that was cut off the rock that was cut by no human hand. And that stone hits the ground and it grows and spreads throughout the world. And that's the kingdom of God that grows, right? So that grows. And as the kingdom grows, well, as more people become Christian, then the more people you have, the more of a nation you have, if that makes sense. So you have people who have been Christian nations for the longest time, like Syria, right? You have Christian nations there. The Armenians are the Christians. Russians now identify as Orthodox Christians. So you have Christian nations, that are ethnic. They identify themselves as Christian. But besides that, the point is that it grows and grows. God's kingdom grows. The gospel spreads. And that eventually becomes nations. That's the reason why in the 300s, Constantine legalized Christianity. And all of a sudden, the Roman Empire became predominantly Christian emphasis, right? Had Christian emphasis behind it. Does that mean it's perfect? No one's saying that it's perfect. There's going to be mistakes no matter what. But at the same time, the whole point is that Christ was the emphasis, the center point of worship. So Christ then, as we said here, is the keystone here for that's his shoulder. And on his shoulder, the government's reign. And that's where you get here with Paul in Romans 13, where he's inviting people, don't come against and rebel against the government, right? Especially in his time with Nero, who's killing Christians. Okay, you think about that. What he's saying that's way more radical than today, where someone just like bothers us a little bit. Yeah. We're like, take them down, right? It's a little bit more tense now. Too many
taxes.
Yeah, that's funnier maybe 7 years ago, but
yeah,
but now it's getting a little more extreme. But the point is that it was actually way more extreme in Paul's time. It was still more extreme than our time, and he still says, honor the emperor. Mm-hmm. He still says, right? That's what Peter says, and he still says in Romans 13 that the government is an agent of God. So what does that mean, that he's an agent of God, right? Well, okay, so God has put people into place under his sovereign authority. And those people, right? As Christians, we go into nations and we simply just spread the gospel, live a good life, right? Don't cause strife, don't cause rebellion. You honor the emperor, not above God, but you honor the emperor in the position that God has given him, right? God's given that emperor authority. In our case, we don't have an emperor, so it's a little bit different. But either way, the point here to be made here is that over time, what happened when Paul said do that? Well, the true blue Christians who were doing it, eventually the Roman Empire became Christian. Because they kept seeing, well, look, these people are giving to the poor. These people are helping the needy. These people, they actually do things that are good, that we intuitively know are good. And so that actually revolutionized society. It's more of a long game looking at things, not just let's fight. What does Jesus say? If my kingdom was here, everyone here would draw their swords and fight mm-hmm. against them. You defeat evil by doing good. You don't defeat evil by doing evil. And so that's what Christians are called to do. So long story short is that if the governments are evil, keep doing good. And the long game, your children, maybe your children's children, God will create that kingdom. But it also is not just now.
Or maybe you'll all get murdered. But it's gonna be okay. We can't have like this. I don't know. I feel like it's a little bit of a false assumption to be like everything will just eventually be. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Because if we look at like horrible kings in the past who have had inexcusable behavior, like Ahaz murdering children, his own children, right? Those guys didn't get a second chance at life, right? Like that was it. That was it for them.
Yeah.
Now, I mean Hezekiah for sure, but I mean we're looking at Judean kings at this point. But the point still stands that even if a government isn't acting righteously as a good agent of God, they will be held responsible for that.
Yes.
They will be judged for that, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So like regardless of whether Christianity eventually makes an impact on that government or whether that government is successful in completely annihilating Christianity within its borders, God's will be done eventually, because this earth is not all that there is. And there will be a new heavens and a new earth where we will not have an earthly king. We will have God as our king.
Right. But that's what that's also referring to.
Right. Because we've got Jesus, this Prince of Peace, and God, the ultimate king, right? Reigning together. Yeah, I know I was kind of a fly in the ointment there, but I wanted to push. I wanted to take your point and push it to its like ultimate extreme,
right?
Where it's like, even if that doesn't happen, even if,
regardless of your progeny and your children, right? Because what's the point? Oh, do I just want to spread the kingdom of God for my kids' sake? Well, no, it's Christocentric.
Yes, exactly.
You have to spread it for God's sake. And now, will nations be judged for doing evil? Of course they will, and these things happen, right? And God will send other nations to judge other nations. Kind of the reason why there's wars and rumors of wars. So the point here to be said is that you have that Christ-centered focus, and then you know that God will bring this into judgment and bring something good out of it. Because even judgment's good, even though it's upon the evil. It is good because evil has now been exposed, has been visible, right, and dealt with. At the same time, our goal is that's the right attitude to have in terms of goal setting, because we're spreading the gospel, and that's what's going to help the world. So we're coming in we're like, okay, Doctors Without Borders. We have medicine. These people are sick. Yes, there's going to be evil people who try to steal the medicine and try to destroy it because they want to keep people sick. But our job is to create healing, spiritual healing for people by spreading the gospel, right? And as Christ comes through us and all that stuff. So the point here is that that's the attitude.
Definitely.
And as people become healthy, that means they're becoming part of the kingdom.
Definitely. It's like a Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego thing when they refuse to bow, and so they get thrown into the fiery furnace, and they're like, look, our God will save us, but even if he doesn't, he's still God. That's right. It's like an even if.
That's right. Yeah. So so this is referring to both the gospel spreading throughout the nations, and then also to Christ's final return, where the leaves are for the healing of the nations, right? Where he returns and he heals those who have been hurt. Anyways, so there's a relationship there. But I think that's enough for that. I think that kind of gets the point across. It means exactly what it means. Corie.
There's definitely some nuances based on your eschatological viewpoints, right?
Right.
Like within historic premillennialism or like dispensationalism, there will be an earthly millennial reign of Christ before the new heavens and the new earth. So they would add to that and be like, but he actually will be a physical king for 1,000 years here on earth, a la Revelation. Right. So that's just an added extra caveat for those of you who might be out there going, but wait.
Right.
But I want to ask you another question.
Sure. Okay. Go ahead.
Isaiah 14. This is from user VF6RV2EK8S.
Wow. Yes.
I said that quickly, but I don't
Very important name. Yes, go ahead.
Very important. Okay. I watch your weekly program and enjoy it very much. Thank you. I hope this comment gets to you, as I'm not very good at this. Got it. I have a question rather than a comment. Someone asked me how Jesus and the evil one both could be called the morning star. I know who Jesus is, but could you explain it on your program for those who have the same question? Thank you. I will keep watching. Love Bible Discovery TV. I have learned so much since I started watching. Thank you.
Okay,
awesome.
So they're both not called morning star at the same time. Lucifer, which is what people associate with as Satan, right? Before he fell, was called the day star, right? Son of dawn, right? It was called the morning star. And then when he falls, he's no longer called Lucifer. He's no longer called day star. What does God call him? God and Christ too, they call him the devil or the accuser, Satan. So they stop calling him by his quote unquote proper name. They start calling him by what he's become, if that makes sense. Anyways, so they're never called at the same time, but after Satan falls, is no longer called that, Christ rises, quote unquote, and becomes the morning star. What does Peter say? Let the morning star rise in your hearts. And in Revelation, Christ literally calls himself the morning star. So with that in mind, right, the morning star is like the brightest star, right? The brightest star there is, even at daybreak, you can see it. So you might be wondering, okay, so like why? Why this analogy? Well, okay, so stars are usually representative of like angelic beings or the heavenly hosts, right? It's also equivalent to those, as with Abraham, those who have faith, right? Children of Abraham will be as numerous as the stars. So there's parallels here to those, to the heavenly things with the stars, especially the heavenly host with the angels. So you pair that with, I'm not saying Christ is an angel, but what we're saying is you pair that with what's happened here is you have Satan who falls, right? Is no longer the morning star. And then Christ takes that place. So what's happening here? It's usurp of authority. Satan has power over death. Okay, that's the idea. So you should read that believe in Colossians or Corinthians. And when Jesus dies and went to Hades and came out, he had the keys to Hades. And this idea is that he's the bright star, right, that you can see, that everything points to. And what that does is it's usurping that role that Satan had. So that's all it is. It just means simply that he's replaced the role, right, the position that, quote unquote, of Lucifer, that Lucifer had. That does nothing to do with angelic, like whether or not Jesus is an angel, anything like that. Jesus is God, 100%. It just simply is telling you about the title itself of morning star, of being the brightest star, and even that you can see at night and even in the daytime. Now that star itself is now representative of Christ. So it's a representation. It's not like a literal, actual, like, entity switching, if that makes sense. Anyways, that's it. So it's just a title. I hope that makes sense. I hope I didn't rant too much. Corie, you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's fine.
Okay, I think that's it. Yeah, nothing much more to add to that. Corie?
Yes.
Isaiah 20.
Isaiah 20.
Was Isaiah really naked for 3 years straight? Why did he do that? And what does that mean for prophets today who can they do the same thing? Well, they can go to jail. They can do the same thing.
I guess they could.
Yeah. I would say jail time would be on the table.
It depends. It depends on where they are doing this.
This is true.
You know?
Sometimes you can watch documentaries and people are naked all the time and no one bats an eye.
All the time.
But then you're naked here and it really is a big deal.
There are times and spaces in the West for that. Yes. So Isaiah chapter 20 does tell us that the prophet Isaiah took off his sackcloth. So he had been wearing sackcloth as a sign of mourning, to go along with his prophecies of judgment. But then in Isaiah 20, God says, go and loose the sackcloth from your waist and take off your sandals from your feet. And he did so, walking naked and barefoot. So yes. Then the Lord said, as my servant Isaiah has walked naked and barefoot for 3 years as a sign and a portent against Egypt and Cush, so shall the king of Assyria lead away the Egyptian captives and the Cushite exiles, both the young and the old, naked and barefoot, with buttocks uncovered, the nakedness of Egypt. And they shall be dismayed and ashamed. So yes, this happened. And it's offensive. I mean, like, think about being Isaiah's children for a second, and Isaiah's wife. And even just Isaiah. But I mean, the secondhand embarrassment that one would probably feel and shame that one would probably feel for one's authority figure, like a father, doing this, because we have to remember Isaiah was royal blood. So he lived in the elite section of Jerusalem with the well-to-do of Jerusalem. And his life gets so radically turned upside down by being called a prophet of God. And I think sometimes we have these rose-colored glasses on about what it must be to have been an Old Testament prophet who not only had visions from God and dreams from God, but heard direct messages from God. But I think Isaiah is proof that it was not all rainbows and butterflies, you know, like he was severely humbled in this and really had to put his pride on the back burner completely. So this would have been really shocking, not only to have a prophet do this, but to have a prophet of royal blood do this, who had been in, like we talked about, he had a very prestigious job in the courts of the kings before being called a prophet. And then he still would have had a prestigious role as this royal prophet, literally prophesying to the kings and the officials of Jerusalem. He's not just some country bumpkin prophet talking to anyone. He's literally talking to the priests and the kings and the princes and the officials, all the upper tier guys. But there's another reason why this would have been really shocking, and it has to do with Egypt and Cush in particular. So we know that Judah, led by Jerusalem, had traditionally leaned on their political relationship with Egypt and Cush for not only political security, but also military power. So there was times in Judah's history, you can read in the Kings and the Chronicles and even in Samuel, where there are outfits of soldiers, essentially mercenary soldiers from places like Cush. There's soldiers from Egypt as well that are housed in Jerusalem and Judah sometimes as these auxiliary troops to kind of bolster the military of Judah. And I mean, the relationship is on again, off again, because sometimes they're hostile to Egypt and sometimes they're not hostile to Egypt. But we know, for example, during the time period of Hezekiah had reached out and made an alliance with Egypt at least once against Assyria. And Egypt was seen as this old, reliable, really difficult to defeat ancient power. And so Isaiah, I mean, being naked would have been shocking for 3 years, very shocking. But then also that meant that Egypt and Cush, these warrior nations, were going to fall to Assyria was shocking in and of itself and really bad news for Judah, because if those great military powers could fall to Assyria, then there is no reason why Judah should not also fall to Assyria. So the message here is pretty clear in what Judah then should do. And Hezekiah got the message. Hezekiah, we see with his kingship, went completely 100% into, all right, if we're going to survive this, we're going to survive it by following God, because God is going to protect us. He has to be the true king of Judah and Jerusalem. And if he is, he will ensure our survival. So that's what it meant, and that's why Isaiah did it, I would say. Anything to add?
Yeah, so I guess you could be new to prophesy today.
Oh, right. Back to the prophet. I mean, it's hypothetically possible, but it would be really bad news.
Yeah.
It would be really bad news because nakedness is, in the ancient world, it was so shameful because clothing established humanity's humanity. It was part of what separated us from the animals. It was part of what took us, it separated us from the wild chaos into civilization under which humanity had taken dominion of the world and created clothing for themselves. So there's this idea behind clothing that it is a sign of civilization. It's a sign of health. It's a sign of
status.
It is a status, you know? And so this is even why clothing was taken off in mourning and sackcloth was putting on, which was really rough, bare minimum clothes, because it took away your status and got you closer to this like chaos, almost like death state, animalistic state, which is really interesting in and of itself. So if a modern prophet today were to strip naked, it would be shocking, just like it was shocking for Isaiah, but it would probably be very bad news because it's stripping you of status and it's representing judgment, which is, I mean, I hope it doesn't happen. It could happen. It could happen.
Yeah. Well, supposing it did happen, right? The message has to be full-blown repent and all these things. If it's anything other, I would say that this guy is off his rocker.
Look, God used...
Some guy just wants to be naked out there and get attention.
Okay. It depends on what they're saying.
The world's pretty weird now.
For sure, it depends on what you're saying, but that's true of anything. Like, I think God uses, if the prophets of the Old Testament and New Testament, even the New Testament, because they also use signs, Agabus bound Paul's hands. There's signs all throughout it, physical acting that goes along with prophecy.
Yeah.
So if the Bible teaches us anything about prophecy, it's that sometimes signs are used and images are used and acting out is used. So there's a place for it.
No, I hear what you're saying.
There's a place for it.
It gets the point across really quick.
Definitely. I just like it would be very bad news if that happened.
Yes.
It would not be great.
Yeah.
And maybe jail time, depending on where it happened.
And where is pray it's not at your doorstep. All right.
Yes,
Corie,
indeed.
Final question.
Okay.
We're already here. It's 29 minutes left or whatever.
We're doing great. We're 29 minutes in. 29 minutes in. You mean?
Sorry. Thank you. All right. So it's the last question, Corie.
Okay.
It says, "Hi, Corie Matlock. I understand the people from..." It's from Sue. I do this every time. And I think I talk about it every time, too. I say the question. Then I'm like, wait, I should say who's saying it first. Okay, Sue asks, or says, "Hi, Corie Matlock. I understand the people from the northern kingdom of Israel are exiled first, followed by the southern kingdom some years later. Do these two groups of people unite in returning to the promised land and in the rebuilding of the temple and wall? Thank you." Sue.
Yeah.
Go
I'm quickly running over to Ezekiel. I mean, Ezra, not Ezekiel. Ezra and Nehemiah to take a look at some of the families who are said to have returned. They were certainly welcome to return. Not a lot of people returned. But yes, the idea is that Israel is Israel once again. It's not Israel and Judah. I would have to go in and look at the different family groups that are represented in Ezra and Nehemiah to give you like a conclusive, here's all the tribes that are represented in the return. I don't have that off the top of my head.
Well,
I'm looking at it right now.
I will say there is a regathering, you could say, in Revelation, the 144,000.
Yep.
Where it says here, "And I heard the number of the sealed, a sealed from every tribe of the sons of Israel." Then it goes 12,000 of Judah, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, Simon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin were sealed. Now in here, notice that Dan's not listed, and also Levi is listed. And I think there's someone else who's missing. I can't remember who it is. But besides that, the point here is that in a sense, these 12 tribes come together and are sealed as the remnant. And what does it say here in Revelation 14? "Then I looked, behold, on Mount Zion stood the Lamb, and with him 144,000 who had his name and his father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven, like a roar of many waters, like the sound of the loud of thunder. The voice I heard was like the sound of harpists playing on their harps. And they were singing a new song before the throne and before the four living creatures, before the elders. No one could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. It is these who have not defiled themselves with women, for they are virgins. It is these who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These have been redeemed from mankind as first fruits for God and the Lamb. And in their mouth no lie was found, for they are blameless." So long story short, is that there's a remnant where these get together and they unite under Christ. Whether or not, that's, I guess, eschatology. Whether or not that happened already or it happens in the future is a different story. The point is there is a regathering. That's all I wanted to say.
I just wanted to double check myself before I gave a completed answer. The answer is yes. So men and women from both northern Israel and southern Judah came back in the return of the exiles led by Ezra and Nehemiah. And I know this for sure from Nehemiah chapter 7. I was just checking it. So we've got like the men of the Levites, right? We've got the house of the kings of Judah that came back, but also Nehemiah 7 gives us a list of the number of the men of the people of Israel, and some of them are families that is really, really difficult to track, but others they give us cities where their families were from originally, and we've got Gibeon and Bethlehem. Anathoth, so these are in Judah. But then when it gets to verse 32, it says the men of Bethel and Ai, the men of the other Nebo. We've got Jericho represented in there. Those are all cities that were in northern Israelite territory. So it didn't matter whether they were from northern Israel or southern Judah. There is a reunification of whatever exiles descended from Abraham wanted to come back, came back to Judah and Jerusalem to repopulate the land. So yes, there is this reunification and this calling them Israel again without that split border between northern Israel and southern Judah.
Right.
So yes. Based on if we're gonna take Nehemiah at its face value, yes,
now,
absolutely.
During the Second Temple period, there wasn't like a big division either because they were ruled by Romans, right? There wasn't like an Israel and Judah like that. They had their different if you were from
Yeah.
By certain
Well,
locations,
after
they
the
wouldn't like
exile.
that, but
Yeah, after the exile, because at first
Yes.
it was Persia,
yes,
right? They came back and they weren't independent. They were under the Persian Empire.
yes,
And then it was the Greek Empire.
yes.
And then they had somewhat of political independence for a little while there. And then before they came ultimately under
Right.
the domination of the Roman Empire.
Right, but and they were still scattered throughout the world at this point too. Like that's what we read about in Acts. And then Christ gathers them back. So it's like, so the tribes themselves,
yeah,
more
there's
or less,
the wider dispersion, right?
Yes.
And that's why we see people coming from a bunch of different countries during times like Passover and during times
Right.
like Pentecost. That's why there's a bunch of different languages represented, because they were Jews, but they had been living in exile and had been coming back
right.
to celebrate the feasts.
That's right.
Yeah, were scattered originally in exile.
Cool.
Yeah,
Well,
that's what I thank you, Sue, for that
I think
question.
that's it. Corie, we're done. Really really fast.
Punctually today. Quick. What do you guys think about these questions? Let me know if any of your answers are different than ours. I'd love to go back and forth with you. You guys have such good comments that you add. I really, really appreciate when you do that. If you have any questions for future episodes, especially episodes getting into the New Testament and even beyond into next year, if there's questions that you've thought of from earlier in the Bible, pop them down in the comment section or email us, because we can pop those into episodes that are up and coming. If you're still watching, please don't forget to subscribe. It grows the channel, but more importantly, it keeps you in tune with what's going on in the ministry and what's going on with this channel, because this isn't the only show that we produce. So yeah, I think that's it. I think that's all the announcements I have. So until next week, happy reading and studying.